What's good, everybody? It's Batman, and we're over here doing another reaction video like I promised, and this one is going to be covering Shisui Uchiha once again. It's basically going to be SWAGKAGE's version of video of his thoughts and perspectives on, on Shisui Uchiha himself, and as you can tell how strong is Shisui is a video title, and we're going to be getting into it. So we're now going to see his thoughts and his mentalities and opinions and arguments of what he thinks of the character, and we're going to get into it. And I will give my thoughts and my response. And other than that, let's give the GOAT a watch and let's get into it. And if you guys don't know who SWAGKAGE is, just to give you a brief recap, he is GOATed. He has incredible videos, incredible content. Definitely would check him out. If you guys have it and you're a fan of Naruto, you are very, very much missing out. He's an incredible Naruto content YouTuber. And if you guys have the passion and love for Naruto, you will not be disappointed with his videos. And most impressively, he also has like about 1 million subscribers. He's no fucking joke. So, definitely check him out. And you guys won't regret it. And let's get into the video.
And today I'm going to be
it. Let's go.
Following up on a promise I made, I don't even know how long ago, honestly, to talk about Shisui in one of these How Strong Is videos. This guy is surprisingly pretty popular, despite the fact that he doesn't appear in the series at all outside of flashbacks. And even in those flashbacks, he doesn't do a whole lot, but I do kind of get it. He is really cool in the Storm games, at least. And whenever one of the characters mentions him, it's usually to talk about how much of a sick, nasty ninja he was. The thing he gets the most hype for, as I'm sure many of you are already aware, is his unique Mangekyo Sharingan power, Kotoamatsukami. One thing that's worth noting is that as far as we know, Shisui is actually the only character to have the same jutsu in both eyes. The same almost applies to Obito, but even though both of his Mangekyo abilities have the same name, they do function in distinctly different ways. One is meant to be used at long range, and the other is meant to be used at short range. Shisui's Mangekyo seem to be functionally identical, though it is hard to say for sure since we've only seen each one used once or twice.
That's interesting. I'm going to be a liar, and I would most definitely be a liar if I were to say I know absolutely everything about Shisui. So I don't know. I'm not saying he's lying. Okay, it's fucking SWAGKAGE for crying out loud. But I don't know how accurate that is, if one is only for close and the other is for long, whatever. I thought from what I knew that one was to affect multiple people and another was only to affect one person. But that's just my take so far. Once again, I don't really know absolutely everything about him. So whatever, I'll let you guys comment that down below, whatever, or provide. I don't. It doesn't matter. But other than that, so far so good. Let's get into it.
In any case, Kotoamatsukami is really powerful, one of the most powerful genjutsu in the whole series. It doesn't physically damage people like, say, Tsukuyomi or Frog Song, but it instead places them under mind control. Shisui can basically get people to do whatever he wants with this jutsu, and the crazy thing is he doesn't even have to establish eye contact to do it. What's even more ridiculous is that the target of the jutsu typically isn't aware of what's happening to them, and unless they're told otherwise, will fully believe that they're making these decisions themselves. The big thing about Kotoamatsukami, though, is despite all of these really good upsides, Shisui can only use it once every 10 years. Or I guess it would be more accurate to say he can use it twice every 10 years, since he does have 2 Sharingan. But that still really sucks. Now, it may not be strictly true, depending on how we interpret a few things.
Yeah, I was about to say, Swag, that's a little weird, because, I get why people would do that. So basically, there's a statement that he's clearly showing from Itachi. Well, basically how the eye works, so on and so forth, etc. Okay, now that I don't believe is actually correct, and the reason why that only applies for people actually utilizing that ability. Now, if it's Shisui Uchiha, that would make no logical sense to say that it would also apply to him directly. That's just stupid, okay? That doesn't make any sense. And the reason why is, for one, it's his Mangekyo eyes. 2, okay, that has never been shown or established when any of the Uchiha characters, when they're utilizing their abilities, okay? So that just makes no sense for Shisui Uchiha to be the only fucking Uchiha to have the only person to have a drawback effect from it. That's just stupid, okay? And then, not only that, correct me if I'm wrong, which I would have to rewatch it again and, follow up, but I believe Itachi says that that's why he wasn't able to use it, because he had to wait, so long. But the reason why he was able to do for it to be used again was because all it requires is Hashirama's cells or something like that, or whatever, to kind of revive it or bring it back, which is something that apparently, is a factor. And so whenever he did it to Naruto, since Naruto is a descendant of, one of the reincarnation of Ashura himself, I guess that somehow did like a trigger a response, whatever. So things like that. But I don't know. I would have to really look more forward into it. I don't know how true that is, but at least a Swag is establishing two concepts of it, that if you want to interpret that, that's how that is for him as well, sure. Or if you want to interpret the other way, sure. So, cool.
But do bear in mind that none of what I'm about to say is set in stone. We are now entering the theory zone.
Oh my god.
So at the 5 Kage Summit, when Ao catches Danzo manipulating Mifune, he says a few things about Shisui and briefly explains how Kotoamatsukami works. The thing about this is, like, how would Ao know any of this?
Exactly. Like, he's not a fucking Uchiha. Like, Shisui never had a conversation and said, hey, Ao, this is how everything works about my eye.
Straight up say that he and Shisui fought before. And, like, sure, but how does he know enough about Kotoamatsukami, a jutsu whose strength primarily lies in the fact that nobody knows it's even being used in the first place, to explain it to a room full of people if Shisui can only cast it once every 10 years? Now, I'm not saying this is a plot hole or anything, don't worry, just give me a second. Remember how at the beginning of the video I mentioned Shisui was kind of a special case because he's like the only Uchiha who has the same Mangekyo power in both eyes? Well, it is actually very possible that he's another Obito situation, where both jutsu have the same name, but function in ways that are slightly different. There actually do seem to be a few key differences between the one Shisui gave to Itachi and the one Danzo stole, and one of these is actually pretty noticeable. When Danzo used it to control Mifune, obviously he was able to do it without establishing eye contact, but Itachi's Chrome, meanwhile, clearly looked Itachi in the eye when casting it. Something else worth pointing out is that Mifune seemed to snap out of Danzo's control completely as soon as everybody pointed out to him that he was being manipulated. Itachi, meanwhile, knew the entire time that he was being controlled, explained to Naruto exactly how the Genjutsu worked, and still never snapped out of it. The final difference is that despite Itachi's claims that the jutsu can only be used once every 10 years, Danzo claims he can use it multiple times in a single day. And this is partially explained by the fact that Danzo's body has been fortified by Hashirama's DNA and chakra, but it could also be explained by functional differences between both eyes. Now, whether you agree with this interpretation or not should affect how strong you think Shisui is, but it probably isn't true, or I at least think that it's safe to proceed under the assumption that it probably isn't true, since there's nothing in the series that indicates this aside from the bits and pieces of circumstantial evidence that I mentioned already. Now, let's move out of the theory zone and return to...
Okay, so far everything he said is very respectable and very understandable, so there's really no reason to even argue it. He basically elaborated on it very perfectly.
Strictly about things we know for sure. Regardless of the presence of any functional differences between Shisui's eyes, there is something I feel pretty confident saying. Contrary to what I believe is a fairly popular opinion, this jutsu probably isn't the win button that many people seem to think it is. Now, I do get it, because based on what we know, you could make a fairly strong argument in favor of this being all Shisui needs to do to win a fight, but it doesn't appear to be something that Shisui can do instantly. I say this because he didn't use it to stop Danzo from taking one of his Sharingan, and we know he had at least one charge left at this point because he was planning on using Kotoamatsukami to stop the Uchiha coup altogether. I guess you could maybe argue that he really wanted to save the jutsu for Fugaku, but Shisui's smart enough to know that Danzo reaching for one of his eyes means he's probably about to lose it, so the only explanation that leaves us with is that he didn't have enough time to cast it. So this should mean that against really fast characters like Minato, he shouldn't be able to cast the jutsu and just win the fight for free. Even if you give him the benefit of the doubt and assume that he could have used Kotoamatsukami at any time but was just really hesitant to, that doesn't change anything for fights where we assume Shisui is in character. Against somebody like, again, Minato, he'd just end up waiting too long to use it and would probably end up dying by the time he realized he needed to. Speaking of his encounter with Danzo, by the way, there are actually a lot of different versions of this scene. In one of them, he even uses the Susano, but I will go ahead and say right now that this is non-canon. While it's perfectly reasonable to assume that Shisui can use the Susano because he has two Mangekyo Sharingan, since we've never actually seen him do it.
I got two things so far. So two little no-nos on my part. So the first thing is the whole downplaying it, and once again, just like King Bullet was trying to do, and basically Swag's trying to basically establish that it's more of an anti-feat, that is nowhere near as much as how powerful as everyone is claiming it to be. I would actually disagree. So he's basically saying that it is a high probability that Shisui cannot do the jutsu immediately as soon as possible, which is really weird because it's like, so what? It's okay to say that, you know, Itachi, Obito, and all these other Uchihas can just spam their abilities whenever they want immediately, okay? But Shisui, on the other hand, can't. That's a little weird, okay? And then two, most importantly, okay, Shisui has always utilized the ability whenever he has thought or deemed it necessary to do so, okay? And once again, I already kind of covered this in the other video that I've released, which is, you know, my reaction to how strong Shisui is with King Bullet, okay? And I'm not going to recap it and basically repeat myself, but just to keep it very short, okay, there was a lot of factors and variables with the whole Danzo situation, period. So overall, basically what happened with Danzo is not only did he ambush him and catch him off guard, and he was poisoned and the bugs and everything, so on and so forth, okay, you know, to where Shisui was not at full power, very nerved, so on and so forth, etc., okay, like, that's the first thing to put into consideration. And then two, you got to remember, in character, Shisui is not trying to kill, okay, or fucking go all out or whatever, you know, Danzo and all these other people. He will only do it if it's absolutely necessary. Or better yet, you could easily argue because of him being poisoned and the bugs and on top of, you know, and so on and so forth, that maybe he couldn't. And that's why he only used, you know, his 3-tomo Sharingan Genjutsu on Danzo and said, sorry, you'll be able to snap out of this later, whatever, and that was it. And then obviously we know what happens from there. So, I don't know. I don't think that's a fair judgment to kind of say upon Shisui. That's just kind of my opinion on that. And I feel like there's a lot of evidence to the contrary with that as well. So, and then also with this point, he's also establishing, saying that Shisui is non-canon. I also even elaborated on that, of why it is possible, or better yet, most definitely is canon, okay, of him having a Susano. And not only is it in the novels, but it's also in the video games. And not only that, Kishimoto was heavily involved in the production of the video game. And on top of it, he had to give the approval and thumbs up for the game to even be released or anything that happened in it to begin with. And then most importantly, Kishimoto was also confirmed to not only draw and write and design Shisui's Susano and his perfect Susano as well. So it's very weird and in my opinion very ignorant, okay, or better yet, you know, it's one thing to establish like, okay, if you think it is cool, if you don't, cool, whatever. But it's really weird to say that it's absolutely not when there's tons of evidence to say otherwise. That's all I'll say on that.
Any canon material, saying he can would be purely speculative. The Susano version of this scene is, if I had to rank them, probably the least authentic since it's from a game. There are two other interpretations, one from anime filler and one from a light novel, and this is the version we'll be using since it's the canon one. This is actually pretty good for Shisui since the light novel is the version where he comes out looking the best. The anime version specifically is not very kind.
Once again,
in the light
poison, the bugs and all that, so it's not fair. You know what I mean? That's really fucked up. Like, come on, Swag. You can't do a character that dirty like that. You are literally like, you know, the Naruto community content channel. Don't do that. That's not cool. You're doing Shisui dirty. You're disrespecting the man.
novel, though, Shisui doesn't lose to Danzo in a fair fight. He doesn't get his ice stolen because Danzo is faster or stronger than him, but instead because Danzo ordered a member of the Aburame clan to use its insects to afflict Shisui with a paralysis poison. Now, the reason this is good for Shisui isn't because it's necessarily impressive or anything, but instead because it means his loss to Danzo isn't indicative of his physical abilities. Shisui definitely gets a bad rap for being the guy who lost to Danzo, and what makes it even worse is that Danzo didn't have his Izanagi arm at the time they fought, so he would have been a lot easier to kill at this point than he was when he fought Sasuke. I'm sure I'm even guilty of pooping on Shisui for this in the past, and it's not really fair because, like I said, in the canon version of this fight, Shisui was totally paralyzed. He really couldn't do anything.
Poison, then the bugs paralyzed him. Like, what the fuck are you supposed to do? Like, that's not fair to him. You can't downplay Shisui when he was literally not only caught off guard and ambushed, and then hit by things that were hacks-based abilities, to where now it makes literally your powers and your talents and everything completely renderless and useless. Once again, the same analogy that I used in the other video, if Batman uses Kryptonite and Superman, now Superman is not at his full power levels, and basically he just gets beaten and washed up. Same exact concept, okay? Prep time and having a strategy to make someone not powerful anymore, okay? would be, in theory, the only way to beat that person. And that is literally what happens to Shisui. He was so powerful to where Kishimoto had to literally give someone prep time and ambush him and catch him off guard. Because mind you, these are his own comrades and his own friends, okay? And that was the only way to get rid of Shisui. Like, you know, so it's, at least he's, you know, at least admitting that. You know, that is most definitely not fair to kind of come with that type of mentality against Shisui and say, oh, he lost to Danzo, he's trash. It's not the same. For instance, when Tobirama lost to Kinkaku and Ginkaku, that alone is actually very embarrassing and really bad. And there is evidence to prove it as well. Okay, Seth and Swag do a very great job to prove that as well. Shisui, on the other hand, is completely different situation. It's not an anti-feat of him losing to Danzo because, once again, he's not only is he not at full power and max amount of power and strength and can't even utilize all his abilities and etc., he's poisoned, nerfed, and paralyzed. That's not fair.
With this is that now we don't really have any point of reference for how strong he is. We know he was stronger than Itachi, which a lot of people like to point out. It does sound pretty impressive until you consider that Itachi was 12 years old when Shisui died. And now don't get me wrong, 12-year-old Itachi was he was no joke. But a lot of people seem to think that Shisui would be able to box with like full power, fully grown up adult Itachi, and that's just not true. Now what is a little more impressive is that he and Itachi are said to be the strongest two members of the entire Uchiha clan. And I don't know if this is supposed to be in terms of like upward potential or just raw ability. I think the second one makes more sense based on the context in which this was said. But regardless, it's a little bit hard to extract anything from this because we don't know how strong the rest of the Uchiha clan was either. Before I go any further, I'd like to clarify that this was also said in reference to the members of the Uchiha clan who are currently alive in Konoha. So Madara, Obito, Izuna, these sorts of people were not taken into account when this was said. So while we can't really look at any feats,
I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. For all you know, it could also be the opposite, and they could have been taken into consideration. Because let's be real, at the end of the day, we all know who the fuck Madara Uchiha is. We all know who he is. Everyone knows who he is. The entire world, okay? And the fact that that was a statement alone of Itachi and Shisui being the two strongest Uchiha in the entire Uchiha clan, that is literally this statement, and written by Kishimoto and so on and so forth, etc., it makes no sense to infer or to assume that that wouldn't be applied to the entire Uchiha clan. That's just really, really weird, okay? So you could argue that the opposite as well. I don't agree with that.
From the people that Itachi and Shisui were being compared to. Something that's pretty interesting is that Fugaku, Sasuke and Itachi's father, was considered for the position of Hokage. Of course, he wasn't actually appointed, but that very fact upset a lot of people, specifically members of the Uchiha clan. These people thought Fugaku was perfectly capable and was the right pick for the job, and saw the decision not to appoint him as a result of the clan's rocky relationship with the village's administration. Now, this narrative that he was cheated out of the position of Hokage may or may not be true, but let's also consider that Minato and Orochimaru were being considered for the position as well. For so many people to be so confident that Fugaku was more deserving of the seat of Hokage than either of them, you'd think Fugaku would have to be pretty strong. So if the statement about Shisui and Itachi is to be taken seriously, and they're both even more powerful than this, that would make Shisui Kage level at the bare minimum. This is somewhat supported by Obito's assessment of Itachi's strength when he joined the Akatsuki. Even at just 12 years old, Itachi was considered a rival to Obito by Obito himself. The same guy who fought Minato.
Hang on.
Obito's assessment.
Yet of all people knew of my existence, Itachi had even picked up on that, for I held grudges against the blah blah. And in actuality, back then, okay. I just cared for that said.
Of Itachi's strength when he joined the Akatsuki, even at just 12 years
old. So I like
old,
how Swag did mention that Itachi was a rival to Obito as well. I like that.
Itachi was considered.
Yeah, he has a video of mainly strongly, heavily one-sided of that Obito would just absolutely destroy Itachi, which I do not agree on that whatsoever. So.
Obito by Obito himself, the same guy who fought Minato and tamed the Nine Tails. The only other thing we really know about Shisui is that he was supposed to be pretty fast, and that he seems to have been more well known for this than for the power of Kotoamatsukami. After all, his nickname was Shisui the Teleporter, or Shisui of the Body Flicker, depending on your source, not Shisui of the Hypnotic Eye, or whatever. There aren't a whole lot of Naruto characters with speed-based nicknames like this, so if we're being generous to him, it might even indicate that he was one of the fastest shinobi in the world, but realistically speaking, this doesn't tell us nearly as much as the other statements I went over. Anyway, that should cover everything important, but if I missed anything, feel free to let me know, and as always, thanks for watching. Till next time.
Alrighty, and that'll be the video for SWAGKAGE. Now, pass or fail? Pass. Absolutely a pass. It was a good video, really good content. Overall, he did a general, establishment of the character and everything. There was some points that I didn't really fully agree with, and I feel like, in my opinion, you can kind of go either or in either direction. And then not only that there was more evidence to a certain direction than the one that he was claiming it to be, the opposite. But other than that, it was a great video. I thought it was really good. Now, as you can obviously tell, it is nowhere near the same hype level and the same, pros as for King Bullet. It's more of a lot of cons and a lot of a negative type atmosphere for Shisui. More of like skeptical or like, I don't, whatever, this and that. But at the end of the day, it's understandable, that this character didn't get a lot of screen time at the end of the fucking day. And then not only that, with everything that we do have and so on and so forth, etc., it's more based to like interpretations, or using what we can to kind of have our conclusions and so on and so forth. It's not like we can just call Kishimoto and be like, hey, is this or is this that, So I get it, but at the same time, one thing you got to put into consideration, all because a character has less screen time, or better yet, doesn't do something like to where it's completely blatantly obvious that they can do that, doesn't mean they can't. And that's something at the end of the day we all have to put into consideration and understand. That's just ignorance at the end of the day. So but other than that, great video. It was good content. I hope you guys enjoyed and at least got to see SWAGKAGE's perspective and and his thought process on the character of Shisui Uchiha. Let me know what you guys think of him so far currently as well, and if that even maybe did any light bulbs for you or whatever. And like the video, comment your thoughts down below, subscribe for more content, subscribe you guys on the channel. As always, I will see you in the next